How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Syracuse Aviation, and today I have kind of a little Syracuse Airport update video for you guys. I have had a couple of questions asking what the situation with Gate 15 is, among a couple of other things that I'll get into. So without further ado, we're just going to dive right into it here and get started. So Gate 15, as you guys may be aware, maybe not, has been out of use for about 10 years now, I would say. Maybe slightly more, but it was last used for JetBlue consistently. Then JetBlue moved to Gate 3, and sometimes 12, depending on if they're operating Boston or not, which is an overnight service, which conflicts with the JFK service on JetBlue, so that's kind of why they use 12 spontaneously. But 15 is in operation now. I think for now it's common use at least. It's most consistently used for American overnight to Chicago or Dulles, I think, on the Embraer 175. Sometimes it's used just as, I know a couple months ago there was a JetBlue Embraer 190 that parked there for, I don't know, maybe something broke maybe, and they just had to have a place to wait so that they could free up Gate 3. But today we did have a Southwest flight come in from Tampa. That was, I think there was some delay with another Southwest flight out of Gate 1, so Gate 1 was full, and then Tampa came in, and they had to have a place to park. So 15 was open, and now that the jet bridge is done being installed, they use Gate 15. So I guess you could technically say that Southwest has 2 gates out of Syracuse right now, which may be a little bit of a stretch, because Gate 15 isn't really used consistently for them. Excuse me. I do think, though, in the future, if they add Chicago Midway, I do think Gate 15 will be in use more consistently, especially for Southwest, because, as we know, Chicago Midway is a hub for Southwest, and usually the Southwest hubs have more frequencies than the point-to-point, like Syracuse to Tampa or Orlando. Sorry about that. And then Baltimore, obviously, is a 3 daily, so more of the Southwest hubs in the northeast or kind of Midwest area are higher frequencies, so that's why Chicago Midway and Baltimore would be 2 or 3 daily in that case, which would require another gate, I think, because they only had 5 flights today, 3 Baltimore, 1 Tampa, and 1 Orlando, and they already had to use Gate 15. So I think for sure if they add Midway, that's going to add a bunch of frequencies, and then they're going to need to use another gate, which in this case 15 would be the most logical answer for that. Speaking of more Southwest frequencies, daily MCO will be starting, Orlando service, although it is seasonal, so Southwest will be operating Orlando seasonally daily service, and then for the time that it's not a daily service, I don't know, I think it starts in October and probably goes through spring, which is the daily service, and then for the other times it's just once every Saturday, which I think it should be year-round daily service, but, you know, it's better than nothing, and they're slowly kind of starting to expand out of here. I know Rochester got the same thing, so it's good to see that they're working on the upstate airport presence a little bit more, adding more flights, and then again Midway hopefully coming in the future. So this video is going to be kind of situationed more around Gate 15. So as we know, Southwest, we discussed that a little bit. There's not really a whole lot of clarity because they've only used the gate once today that I'm filming this, and then Americans used it all the other times. So that's really all I know about Gate 15. I do know that the hold room is kind of like an international gate type deal. I know that there's going to be a federal inspection station there, so if we do get international flights, which the airport surprisingly is trying to get Aer Lingus to come in. I don't think that'll happen anytime soon, but it could happen. I know Buffalo almost got Aer Lingus, and then they ended up going to, like, what was it, Cincinnati or Cleveland? No, not Cincinnati. It was Cleveland, or was it Cleveland? It was some Ohio airport that got Aer Lingus, and because Buffalo was close to that airport, there's just not really a reason for Buffalo to have Aer Lingus now. But maybe Syracuse, maybe in the next like 10 years, which I know is a long time, but it's an international service, and for an airport like Syracuse, any international service within that amount of time is pretty impressive, especially if it's to Dublin. I could see Air Canada making a return here on like a once daily CRJ 200 overnight thing. Syracuse to Toronto is kind of a pain to drive because you can't just go straight from Syracuse to Toronto because you got Lake Ontario in the way, so you have to like snake all the way around it, and it makes for a lot longer trip than one would want to drive. So flying it does make a lot of sense. It is a very, very short flight, but again, logistically it makes a lot of sense, and I could see an overnight CRJ 200 or even an Embraer 175, a couple years after they start it, filling up fairly well if it's an overnight service, because Toronto is more of a business city. There is some leisure demand, so the leisure travelers don't usually care about what time the aircraft arrives and departs. But business travelers usually, a lot of times, they like to just go for a day or so, and that would make it so that they want to leave Syracuse early in the morning, have the day in Toronto, and come back later in the night, which, again, an overnight service makes sense for a city like that. So I could see that being a possibility. If that were the case, that would likely go out of Gate 15 because they moved the customs facility from 12 or 14 to 15. Speaking of Gate 14, they will be having a new jet bridge there. There was never a jet bridge there before. We do park aircraft at Gate 14, but it's a very small gate, and it's usually used for just, again, private, general aviation stuff. Because it's the current customs facility, we'll have private jets actually park at Gate 14. So they're going to make a jet bridge and put that in there, and that will be used, I think, for... I want to say the document said diversions or overnight or something like that, but we'll have to see. It's a very small gate. The most they can fit in there is like a Embraer 145. I do think that if they shift Gate 11 kind of to the east, they could shift Gate 12 to the east, and then shift 14 slightly to the east without actually moving a jet bridge. They just move the line that the aircraft parks at, which would open up a little bit of space. So that's a possibility we could see here. And then after that, the hold rooms, especially in the A concourse over in the Gate 11 or 12 or 14 kind of area, are very small. Actually, the airport documents had like a whole section on this saying that the whole airport terminals, A and B concourses, are both outdated and small and crowded. So knowing that the airport authority acknowledges that the terminals are small and outdated is a really big deal, because that means that there's no way, if they're acknowledging an issue like that, there's no way that an airport authority in general, but especially an airport like Syracuse, there's just no way that they're going to ignore that. They're going to try and fix it, and that means they're going to have to expand them. That's kind of what this document was talking about, is that they're going to try to expand the hold rooms, which would include more square footage. So maybe they're going to add some more lounges, which would have to mean like construction, not just inside the terminal building, but the actual terminal building itself, including the exterior. I could see. I did see a couple documents. There's two news sources that talk about $8.6 million being funded to Syracuse Airport. And these articles claim it's some sort of infrastructure bill, which I would have thought that I would see more on this. The only way I found this was by looking up Syracuse Airport News on Google, and these came up from February 2023, February 23rd, 2023, and usually this is the kind of thing that you see on like Syracuse.com making an article, but it's a news article from Auburn Pub and Local Today, and these are news articles I've not heard of before. And so, again, this is the only way I found out about this. I just found out about this today, and it says for Syracuse, it's going to be used for the terminal's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, window substitute, which, just replacing windows, I guess, which is actually, I think it's going to be pretty nice because the current airport windows just aren't really that good. The siding even is going to be replaced at the airport, so that could mean for some nice exterior facades and just nicer colors and that kind of thing, which is going to be really good to see. Binghamton and Buffalo are receiving a little bit of money to do HVAC renovations and that kind of thing, but I don't think they're going to be using any for windows or siding replacement. So again, stuff like that happens behind the scenes that you just don't hear anything about that you really would like to, because especially for people like me, it's a pretty big deal, because this is my home airport, and things like this, especially for Syracuse, are a pretty major change for the airport. And I mean, I literally had to look this up. Usually this is the kind of article you should see on Instagram, and the Syracuse Airport Instagram in general, has a lot of announcements like this. But this time, they didn't, no one said anything about this. So that's going to be really nice to see. Along with, again, Gate 14 getting a jet bridge. Hold rooms there, we already mentioned. There's a new lounge between TSA and Concourse A, which is going to be really good. I think it's supposed to be finished if it's not already finished, it should be finished by summer. So this is a lounge that's going to be filled with a lot of local stuff, you know, like local foods and I think beers and wines and that kind of thing, which is going to be nice for those of you that are able to drink. Can relax a little bit before your flight and enjoy the Syracuse area kind of amenities, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then jet bridges for gate 22 and 24. I think is it 20? No, it's 24, I think. On the very end of Concourse B, there's two slots for 2 aircraft, but there's 1 jet bridge, so it's a swing gate. So depending on which flight is boarding, they use the jet bridge for that aircraft, and when that aircraft leaves, the jet bridge pulls back and connects to the other aircraft. Now, so that they can have 2 aircraft boarding at the same time, they're going to add a jet bridge so that they have 1 jet bridge per gate. Gate 22 is kind of the same way, but it doesn't have a jet bridge that swings over to it. It's just a complete hard stand at the terminal, so that's going to get a jet bridge. And obviously the land side, I made a whole other video talking about that, so if you'd like to, definitely go check that out. That's really all I have for this video. I know it's pretty short. There's not really a whole lot to go over aside from the Gate 15 stuff, just some other little updates. Oh, I did skip over this though. The baggage claim and TSA expansion. Our airport director had an interview on YouTube a couple days ago, or a couple weeks ago at this point probably, and he discussed that because of Micron, which we've already touched on many times, they're going to have to expand the baggage claim and TSA by 2026. So the current baggage claim is actually, it's not bad, it's just the ceilings are low, the baggage belts just aren't very good, and there's only 4 of them. And so I think they're probably going to add 2 more, 1 to each end, because there's 4 baggage claims total right now, but they're split into pairs of 2s on each end of the terminal. I think they can fit 1 more each probably, and then they would have 6, if I had to guess. And I hope they renovate it and not just expand it, because again, it's not bad, it's just really, really plain, and there's nothing really too flashy about it, which there doesn't have to be, but looking at how the rest of the airport is, it would be nice to keep it consistent and make the whole airport, you know, down to little details like this, just kind of consistent and nicer. And then the TSA checkpoint supposedly is getting a little bit more crammed. I've never had to wait a long time in TSA at Syracuse, but I guess that's going to be something they have to fix as well, which they have additional lanes for TSA, but they're just never in use. So that should be pretty easy. And that's all I have. I know the parking garage has been an issue as well. Sorry, I know I just thought of one more thing. The parking garage we've already talked about, but the plans for the parking garage were released before Micron, so I do think they're going to have to expand the parking garage a little bit more than they initially thought, which may be why, because I know originally they were supposed to start construction in 2023. Now they've delayed that a little bit. I think probably because of Micron. They haven't said that directly, but I'm assuming that that's probably what's going on. So a lot of good stuff happening here, a lot of stuff to go over, but it's really awesome to see just because there's so many expansions happening. It's not, again, Syracuse, it's nowhere near like, obviously, our major airports like a Cincinnati or a Nashville or something like that, but it's definitely getting up there towards airports like Buffalo even. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of little expansions that overall are going to lead to probably Syracuse attracting more flights in the coming years. We've already, again, Southwest expansions, things like that. So a lot of good stuff happening. I hope you guys are excited for it. I'm very excited myself. This being my home airport, it's really awesome to see stuff like this happen. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's quick little update video. If you did, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.